Jim Morrison stood beneath the blinding stage lights, his leather pants clinging to him like a second skin, his shirt loose and sweat-soaked. The roar of the crowd surged around him, an ocean of faces screaming his name. But Jim's mind was somewhere else, somewhere darker. It wasn't the whiskey coursing through his veins, nor the pills he had washed down backstage that made the world feel unsteady tonight. No, this was different. The air itself seemed heavy, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. He knew it wasn't just another night with the Doors. This was the end. He swayed and stumbled across the stage, his movements exaggerated, his slurred laughter rolling through the mic. The audience ate it up, believing he was drunk out of his mind. He played his part perfectly. Inside, though, Jim was stone cold sober, calculating. The truth was, Jim wasn't drunk. He wasn't even high, not in the usual sense. Weeks ago, the letters had started. Plain envelopes with no return address, each one containing fragments of cryptic instructions. At first, he thought it was some kind of prank, maybe from a deranged fan. Then came the meetings. Men in suits, their faces hard and devoid of humour, showing up unannounced, knowing things about him no one should know. The first meeting had been in his dressing room, a shadowy figure sitting calmly in his chair, his face partially obscured by cigarette smoke. "We need you, Mr. Morrison," the man had said. His voice was cold and certain. "There's something you can do that no one else can." Jim had laughed, told the guy to get lost. But the man spoke words, sentences, phrases that shouldn't have made sense, but lodged themselves in Jim's mind like shards of glass. Strange symbols, unintelligible sounds, yet they hummed with a vibration he couldn't ignore. They told him he had been chosen, that his music, his voice, his very presence had unlocked something in people, a kind of frequency. It wasn't just music, it was a bridge, a channel. They claimed it wasn't even his doing. It was something that worked through him, and that was why they needed him. At first, he didn't believe them. Why him? He was just a man, a singer, a performer. But then, the nightmares started. Vivid, recurring dreams of alien landscapes, pulsating lights, and incomprehensible voices whispering in a language he somehow understood. He woke up gasping, his sheets soaked with sweat, the words still echoing in his head. The men came back, and this time, he listened. They explained that these dreams weren't just his, they were messages, signals from something beyond, something watching, something waiting. The FBI, they said, had been monitoring him for years. His concerts weren't just performances, they were experiments, tests to see how the masses reacted to him. And the results? Terrifying. Jim was more than a rock star. He was a conduit. The deal was simple. One last performance, one final show to tie off the Doors' legacy. Then he would disappear. His death would be staged, overdose, heart failure, something the public would believe. And he would be free to dedicate himself to the work, translating, communicating, bridging the gap between humanity and whatever was out there. Now, on stage, Jim felt the weight of it all. The betrayal of his friends, his bandmates, the audience that adored him. It gnawed at him, but he pushed it down. This wasn't about them. It wasn't even about him. This was about something bigger, something he couldn't fully understand, but was powerless to deny. The set reached its climax. He let his voice wail, raw and primal, his body writhing as if possessed. The crowd cheered, but he could see their confusion. He wasn't hitting the notes the way he usually did. His movements were erratic, his words slurred. To them, it was just another drunken spectacle. But to him, it was something else entirely. The symbols flashed in his mind over and over, burning brighter with each passing second. He didn't understand all of them, but he knew enough. The men in suits had said it would feel like this, a kind of tearing, a splitting open. By the time the last chord faded and the crowd erupted into applause, Jim was already gone. Not physically. He was still there, standing on the stage, a hollow smile plastered on his face. But something inside him had shifted, something irreversible. Aftermath. The headlines the next day screamed of tragedy. Jim Morrison dead at 27. Official cause of death, heart failure. The world mourned the loss of a rock legend, a poet, a cultural icon. What they didn't know was that Jim Morrison wasn't dead at all. In a sterile, windowless room, deep beneath a government facility, Jim sat at a metal desk, staring at a screen filled with strange symbols. His fingers hovered over a keyboard, his mind ablaze with the language that had once haunted him. Now, it was second nature. A man in a suit entered the room, his face expressionless. "They're waiting, Mr. Morrison. It's time." Jim nodded. He didn't smile, didn't speak. He simply stood and followed. The doors opened and the room beyond was bathed in a strange, pulsating light. Shapes moved within it, impossible, incomprehensible shapes. Jim felt a calm settle over him, a certainty that had eluded him his entire life. He wasn't performing anymore. This was the real show, and it was only just beginning.